Okay, so I'm hiding out kind of behind the house, trying to get away from the wind, and my neighbor has, I guess, been overhearing some of these devotions, and she asked me yesterday afternoon, "Did you do your lecture this morning?" um, I want to tell a couple of stories based on the confrontation between the critics of Jesus who wanted to get rid of him and then Jesus coming right back and letting them know what God's code really is and where the values are that he came in all truth and grace to model and to teach. And it's all about rules. But here are two quick stories about women who were important, who gave me important lessons in my life. This is Mrs. Balsam and Mrs. Schaefer. Now, Mrs. Balsam, Edith Balsam, was the mother of my best friend when I was 7 and 8 years old, living in Northern Virginia. Dad was kind of a rookie at the House of Representatives. He just went up there in 1950 and stayed for 26 years. Good for you, Dad. Jeffrey Balsam was my best friend. And I have to tell you that his mom had a rule where you can go and where you can't go inside the house. And her living room was like the holy of holies of the temple with the Shekinah glory in there. Not only was the furniture the best and most elegant furniture I had ever seen in my young life, maybe until now, but each piece of furniture was covered by heavy plastic, custom sewn to fit that chair or that sofa. Beautiful material underneath the clear plastic, but protected by plastic. There was plastic over the table and over each of the chairs around the table. They never ate at that table. Nobody ever went in. Even the carpet was covered with plastic. She also had some alligators and scorpions and wolverines wandering around in the room to make sure that no 8-year-old boys ever went in there. Each time I visited their house, which was often, I was reminded by Mrs. Balsam, you can stay here in the kitchen or over there in the breakfast nook, or you can go up to Jeffrey's room, but do not go in the living room. That was the rule. That was Edith Balsam. Later I learned and even got to meet Francis and Edith Schaefer, who lived in L'Abri, Switzerland. And this is when I was kind of a hippie, and all the hippies were roaming around the world and looking for the meaning of life and trying to find ourselves and all that kind of stuff. The Schaefers, Francis Schaeffer wrote a best-selling book called The God Who Is There. And their home became a mecca for searching young people. I visited there some years later, but I was able to sit in their living room. This was after Francis died, but Edith showed us where they used to host all of the wandering, searching, bohemian, unwashed, chain-smoking hippies of my generation. And she didn't have to point out all the cigarette burns on the wooden arms of her easy chairs and on the top of a nice wooden dining room table. Somebody asked her about that. And she said, it was a hard choice, because I like my furniture. I've collected it from all over the world, but I love young people more. And a few cigarette burns on my easy chairs that's a small price to pay for the opportunity to share Jesus with these seekers. Now, the rule in Edith Balsam's house was don't touch. And the rule in Edith Schaefer's house was come on in. One rule was entirely self-protective, and this was where the Pharisees were coming from. They thought that by washing their hands correctly, God would be pleased and they would be saved. And if Jesus and his followers were not keeping the ancient rules, they were lost. Maybe way back in Old Testament times, there was a reason to do some extra ablutions and hand washings and other kinds of cleanliness, especially when they were out there wandering around in the desert. But washing your hands correctly doesn't make you right with God. And Jesus was very careful to point that out. He gave us a rule. He called it a new commandment. He said, love one another as I have loved you. And Jesus didn't get a rip about dirty furniture or cigarette burns on the arms of chairs. He was all about sacrifice and paying the cost of welcoming other people into our lives. Yeah, he has a rule, but his rule is love and risk. Last story, I'll just throw this one in. I know this is taking too long. My daughter told me I can't go more than 4 minutes. Is this more than 4 minutes? One of the churches I served, I was going to take the kids to a weekend camp, and a high school girl was coming along. Her dad had this really nice station wagon. We needed transportation. So I went to her father, who was a leader in the church, and asked if we could borrow the station wagon for the weekend. Yeah, he could use my raggedy old car. And I wanted to take his station wagon full of high schoolers to camp. And he got real serious real quick. And he said, oh, no. No one drives my car. I never let anyone borrow my car. So I smiled and probably never should have done this. But I said, hey, you're going to trust me with your daughter for the weekend, but not your car? I was fired several times from my jobs in youth ministry.